Today's training is a half-hour long. We're going to cover very top-level general ledger and labor distribution. It would be impossible to show what we do and how well we do it within that half hour. So it's intended to have you know what we can do and know which questions you want more information on as we delve deeper, and you can do that again at support@beyondpay.com. We will very briefly review system of labor allocation, one-time versus permanent allocation, and then we will review the actual reports that are the labor distribution report and the general ledger report. And that is where the level of detail will be only cursory, and then we'll leave that up to further exploration if you want to apply it to your own company. So without further ado, I will go ahead and jump into the BeyondPay system. And on your screen now is a BeyondPay system window. It may look a little different than what you currently use. We are upgrading our user interface. It will be a slow deployment. It won't be changed on you without prior notice, but it certainly is available to you now. If you'd like to have it, please let us know. If you'd like to take your time and get used to it, that is also our plan. But for the sake of this training, everything that I show on the new UI also applies to the legacy UI that you're currently on. And again, your service rep would be happy to walk you through either or both. And the menu options may appear different, but will be located for everything I show you in the same place. So with that being said, I will go ahead and explain to you that most companies use one or maybe two cost centers. It may not be common knowledge that we actually can set up as many as 9 cost center trees. The standard 3 would be division and department and then project. Very many companies only use department or maybe division and department, but they're fully customizable. They're fully nameable however you'd like to name them, and each one can have as many as 10 sub-departments. So for your particular business, 1 or 2 might suffice, but know that you're not limited by that number, and you can use as many as 9 separate cost center trees. Once we've established your cost center, now we want to begin allocating your labor across those cost centers. And the first agenda item is one-time versus permanent labor allocation. So for the sake of demonstration, I am going to navigate to payroll entry. This very well may be one of the more common functionalities that everyone in attendance does. When you're keying in your payroll, rather than have the wages for a particular individual allocate strictly to their home department, you may want to have a one-time override. So for the sake of this demonstration, I've already initiated a payroll. So there are already existent payroll for this demo. And for this specific employee, she is a sales representative that works $920 worth of earnings in the sales department. We're assuming that this person perhaps worked overtime. Maybe she did an extra project and maybe you want to pay her an additional amount, but it wasn't for the sales department. Perhaps she helped out in another department, and for a small amount of time, for a short-term period, you're going to pay her an additional $100. I've gone ahead and brought in the column known as department into the normal payroll entry view. You might not have department in your view, but it certainly can be added or removed very simply with a couple of clicks. Again, that was one of the previous trainings, and we can certainly send you that link, or your CSR can show you how to do that on demand. But for this demonstration, her standard $920 will allocate to sales, and I've added an additional row of $100 for time she spent working in administration. Again, it's a one-time update. It's only going to apply to this payroll, and it will not reoccur going forward. Now that I've saved that pay statement, I'll briefly navigate to the labor distribution report just to show you how it's flowing through, and then we'll return to it in a little bit to show you more detail on the labor distribution report. So this report is a little bit busy because of the nature of the payroll. I will go ahead and apply a filter, again on a previous training. And when I navigate to this employee, you can see now that every item, every line item that she is being paid throughout this payroll is being evenly distributed based on the amount of, proportionally distributed based on the amount of income she was paid. So every line from her overtime to her salary, which is the only two entries I keyed in, her standard 920 and her secondary one-time $100, those are being allocated appropriately to sales and admin, but then following suit is each individual line item. Her federal income tax is broken out to the same proportion. Her Social Security is broken out to the same proportion. So when you run this report, it will allocate to those departments for one paycheck, but broken into several pieces. Conversely to the idea that it was a one-time override that will not be existent next payroll, there may be occasion where you have a staff member that routinely works maybe half in one department and half the other department. Perhaps you're not even allocating that now. Perhaps you're doing it manually every time. So I thought it would be valuable to show you that you can in fact set that as a default setting so that you don't have to key it individually. Rather, every time you pay the individual, it will allocate it for you automatically. We call this a labor distribution. It's located at the employee edit employee location. And within there, of the several profiles that hopefully you're very used to by now, for some this is review, perhaps some it's new. Within the labor distribution profile, these are also fully customizable. You can set up an infinite number of labor distribution profiles. For the sake of demonstration, I've gone ahead and set up one that says 90-10 sales admin. I named it, it's custom nameable, whatever works for you. And in doing so, what I'm telling the system to do, that every time you pay this individual, automatically distribute 90% of their pay to sales and the other 10% to administration. And note, just on while I'm on this screen, that I currently having it applying to all earnings, but you can even go as granular to say, whenever I pay this individual or individuals certain types of earning. For example, maybe you want to distribute worked hours, but you always want vacation to go to their home department. You can limit exactly which earnings distribute. But for her, I'm saying that regardless of pay, always allocate 90% to sales and 10% to admin. By creating this profile and applying it to the individual, now when you enter payroll or initiate an automatic payroll, it will automatically distribute 90-10, and you don't have to know to do it yourself. You can certainly override it if need be, but it will be set and it will flow through to all your future reports. And again, that you can set up an infinite number of labor allocations and go to as granular detail as you'd like. So that's, now I'll go ahead and jump into the report side. This at its core is a reports training. I wanted to spend a little bit of time showing how you can key it in the system or key it reoccurring, and then to show you what happens once you've done that. So I'm going to navigate to my reports. And you'll notice in the new UI, it goes vertically versus horizontally, which you may be used to. And in my reports, payroll, and we're going to navigate to labor distribution. Once landing on this report, this is where I was previously. It will show you on the fully detailed level how you've spread your earnings through your net pay and deductions by department. And you can start seeing the cost of your cost centers, and you can start making business decisions and creating other reports based on your information. And for now, I'm going to select the range just for last month, perhaps to encapsulate a little bit. And this is where I thought a lot of value would be well for the training. For those of you familiar with Microsoft Excel, when you use subtotals, it's very easy to expand and collapse your data. And you can see it on a very tight view and a very expanded view. The same applies to the labor distribution report. And it's the same information that is flowing through all the other reports you're probably using every day and very familiar with. For example, the payroll register or the pay statement history. But what I like about the labor distribution and wanted to show is that the ability to expand it on the fly versus rerunning it or having to export it to get your own total. So I'll go ahead and show you that. All the same filters can apply. You can sort it and you can limit to just which you'd like to see. But for example, this report happens to be 136 rows of data. It's showing the granular detail by department of each individual employee. Let me actually change my day range. When viewing this report, if you want to collapse the amount of data you see, for example, instead of 136 rows, maybe you don't care to see the granular distribution between earnings that were regular and earnings that were salary. By hiding the earning deduction tax name, you've compressed your report from 136 to 48 rows. You now just have a line for earnings, and it's for each person, but perhaps you don't want to even be that granular. Perhaps you're looking for an overview of your departments. By removing every indicator that is an individual will further collapse it. For that demonstration and speed of use, I'm going to go to select columns, and rather than add columns, I will remove the top three: employee ID, first name, last name. All three of those elements would attempt to spread your distribution by individual. But as soon as you remove every iterance that calls for the individual, it will now only show you 21 lines, which is showing you each earning by department, each deduction by department. So I'll go ahead and group that. Perhaps that'll be easier to look at. So you can see a subtotal versus for sales, all of your earnings, deductions, and this is actually further broken out by division. I will hide that column as well. Again, continuing to compress. Now we've dropped down to 15 rows, and now we're truly at a macro view. For each department, we can see what sales, total earnings, total deduction, and total employer deduction cost. And below that would be operations. And it's important to note that when you drop columns out of your view, you are not permanently removing them from anywhere. You're hiding them from view, much like you would hide a column in Excel, but it's just as easy to return it. For example, maybe you wanted to see it by division. By selecting select columns and navigating back into the division name, it goes back up from 15 rows to 21 rows and begins to show you the divisional distribution within that department. I'll click ungroup and show you the raw data. This is one of the more useful reports that you can then filter. Perhaps you only want to see New Jersey, and even eventually export to Excel if there's other applications you intend to use your data in. Here I've applied a filter and shown just the New Jersey, and then further broken it down by security, sales, and operations, showing the subtotals thereof. So again, the labor distribution report is the full metadata of that payroll. And within there, you can begin to hide and add columns and show your labor allocated across your cost centers and get to see the expenses and the true real-time data for any period of time you'd like to see. Another one of the options, which may be a little more useful on the fly, is the labor distribution summary. It's the next option for reports in the same location. And what this one does is it goes ahead and just shows you the macro without having to suppress and bring in columns. I'll show it for last month just for an encapsulated period of time. So here for last month, you can see the total cost of administration. It gives you, by default, total earnings, total employer deductions, total employer taxes, and then a subtotal thereof. And what that's doing is, at the end, it shows you the actual expense for that department, much like a mini GL would. This particular report is intended to be perhaps distributed to you immediately after you run your payroll. This is the macro. The other is a full detailed view, which you can customize and expand and collapse on the fly. Once a labor distribution has been allocated, we can then apply your GL mapping. Oh, let me back up for just a second. Setting up your cost centers and setting up your labor distributions for you is not an additional charge. It's something you can do yourself. It's something you can ask for help from your CSR. It's onboard functionality that does not carry a charge to set up or to utilize. Once you have your labor distribution report and your labor distribution set and you start using it, the next logical step is the next agenda item, and that is to flow it to your general ledger. Begin mapping your general ledger codes to that allocated data. General ledger is also, the report is free of charge. There is a nominal setup fee. If you'd like to provide us your chart of accounts and a sample posting, there is a one-time setup fee for us to build out your customized general ledger mapping. But once we've done that, there's no additional charge to then flow this labor distribution data over to a general ledger that is mapping to your custom columns, your custom mapping. So I'll go ahead and navigate to there. My reports, payroll, and general ledger. And then you'll notice it's similar looking data, but rather than showing you the name of your cost center, it begins applying, in this case, it's numeric. Very often general ledger accounts are text-based, but this is a numeric general ledger. It's actually 50-50 for demonstration purposes. But all of that same data that resided in the labor distribution is now flowing directly into your general ledger, appropriately breaking your expenses into debits and your deductions into credits and applying your mapping to it. The general ledger is very similar to the labor distribution in that the level of detail that you're asking to see expands and contracts much like a spreadsheet or much like the labor distribution report. So for example, this code 21410 is mapped to employee fed withholding, but it's not currently telling us which cost center drove that. It's a macro. If you wanted to see which cost center this general ledger is sending you, is driven from, again, select columns. And by requesting to see the general ledger name that drove that, the report goes from 30 rows to 51 rows, and it begins telling you which cost center drove that general ledger code, and can also be brought into the individual employee level, to the individual check date level. You can run this for the entire year and begin to subtotal it if you saw value in having an entire year's worth of data all on one report with indicators of which employee or which check date. And any report we create, you can have several versions thereof. So you can save and retain a macro overview, a year-to-date overview, an employee view, and start having an individual report by division perhaps, and have that automatically emailed to the appropriate departments or the appropriate personnel that handles that. One step further than that, which also does carry a nominal fee, is once we've set up your labor distribution, once you've started allocating your earnings across that labor distribution and using those reports, now I've showed you that those reports can flow into our general ledger reporting, which is fully customizable. I forgot to add. I have yet to see a general ledger report that we can't just onboard create or through custom columns accommodate what you and your business's processes are. And then the last logical step would be to create an import. The general ledger is, at the end of the day, has to be applied to your general ledger software. Very many of you are currently posting that manually. Most general ledger softwares, all I would imagine, or most, I will leave it with, have the ability to import data directly from several sources. So to save you the step and room for error from manual entry, any view in BeyondPay can be exported to Excel. Any Excel sheet or CSV or text file can be custom formatted to the specs that are required for your general ledger software. And on board to the BeyondPay software is several popular and mainly used general ledgers. So of course, the number one in the industry, I believe, is QuickBooks. So on board to the BeyondPay software is the ability to create a QuickBooks export that will be immediately available to you. You'll create it, import it into QuickBooks, and your posting will be done rather than manual. This demonstration client already has a QuickBooks IIF, which is the file, and you can, with a click of a button, decide your date range, typically by one pay period, but I'll leave it as last month. And you can export a file. It wouldn't typically export to Excel, but I will show it to you in Excel so you can see it. And it applies all of the proprietary formatting for a general ledger file that is ready to be imported into the QuickBooks system. We have several other onboard formats other than QuickBooks in case you're not using it. And even the ones that aren't ready to go canned onboard to the system, we can custom write a data export or a payroll export that creates a file that is, after you run payroll, is immediately available to you, can be downloaded and then uploaded into your software. And from payroll to labor allocation to general ledger creation to importing that posting to your system can take minutes rather than perhaps an hour or so of depending on your level of complexity. The export as well carries a nominal setup fee, but all of the functionality, the reporting, the ability to export your own data into Excel are all on board, can all be set up, customized for your company, and your CSR through support@beyondpay.com would be happy to elaborate on any or all of the functionality that I very quickly touched on. And as a final note, I wanted to explain, which hopefully it doesn't always apply, but if there is an error made, if you accidentally allocated somebody to the wrong department, maybe you've been doing it for several payrolls, well, that allocation has flowed through your payroll, your labor distribution, to your general ledger for the entire time it was wrong. The ability for BeyondPay to retroactively correct your labor distribution and your general ledger is a matter of minutes. It's a setting. We apply it as far retro as you'd like, and we can run those history reports in retro for you. And it's one of the things that perhaps isn't immediately knowable as you navigate the system, but that functionality that in other software platforms, or maybe even doing it manually, to know something was posted wrong in the past, to then manually have to correct it, it's something that you can do by contacting us. We can walk you through it, and we can do it for you. And we are happy to reallocate your labor through your general ledger for you if there's an after the fact change that you had to make. So with that, that's 25 of the allotted 35 minutes. A ton of dense information, certainly not intended to be a training more than an overview and to get you guys asking questions, and hopefully I see a few have come in so we can have some webinar questions, and then please don't hesitate to reach out to us individually and offline and let us know if you want to use any or all of the cost centers, labor allocation, all the way through to general ledger and an export file for you to do your posting.
All right, thank you. So I do see some questions coming in here. One of the first questions asks, do you have to distribute everything? Can you just distribute earnings?
Yes, the short answer is yes. Very many other payroll platforms that I'm familiar with, or even for your business level, maybe you don't necessarily want to distribute everything gross through every deductions. For example, all the credits, all of the liability accounts, that very many people just want to do the expenses or just the earnings. The short answer is yes, we can customize all or just one or several of the pieces of your payroll. So we can just do the earnings, and everything else will just allocate to their home department or any department of your choosing if that's how you'd rather distribute your information.
Perfect, thank you. Another question that we have, can the GL reports accommodate secondary entry?
Yes, the short answer is yes. So the general ledger report I showed was very loosely coded. It's a demonstration client, and it wasn't very logical, but nor did I turn that on. But the onboard coding for BeyondPay absolutely accommodates. It has to be turned on, free of charge, but it has to be turned on. So if you want to navigate to your own general ledger, you're not going to see it unless you contact us to turn it on. But once the functionality is opened up, then what it will do is allow you to put your credits into a liability account and then reverse that back to its debit and move it to cash. I know very many of you need your general ledgers to show that two-piece mapping, and we absolutely can accommodate that functionality.
Thank you. Okay, we've got another question. Are there trainings available on allocating earnings?
The answer is yes. The short answer is yes. Training is always available from BeyondPay, and you can reach out to us at support@beyondpay.com. Training, in full disclosure, sometimes does carry a fee, but we would tell you ahead of time, and it doesn't cost you any money to call us and ask us a question and ask us to show you how to do it. But if you want us to perhaps train 4 staff members to be self-reliant, we would let you know that we're into project mode and would you like to engage us for a formal training. But as far as I would like to know how to use your software to manage my business, that is not a chargeable service. That is, reach out to us and we will absolutely show you how to set up labor allocations, how to apply them. Much like I touched on, how do I only apply it to vacation instead of regular or vice versa? So in summary, the answer is yes, we can absolutely train you. It will almost never carry a charge. And if it were going to, we would let you know well ahead of time and let you know the scope of why we think it does.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all the questions that we've got so far.
Okay. Well, there's just about 2 minutes left till 2:30. So again, I thank you. It's the value I'm hoping that you guys see in these webinars in a half hour is to introduce you to the full functionality of BeyondPay and to get you asking questions. And myself and all of our staff we love to walk you guys through this stuff and show you the system is the state of the art and the best in the market. And as kind of a closing point, I tend to love to tell my clients is if you're doing something manually, chances are BeyondPay can automate it for you, and we can have it in your inbox in the morning. We can have it on demand downloadable. We can have it within obviously the BeyondPay system, and anything you're putting out to a spreadsheet, anything you're keying in manually, any allocating you're doing with a really well done pivot table that you had for 20 years, those things can be within the BeyondPay, replicatable and importable for you. And please reach out to us and let us know, and we'd be happy to customize it for you.